Thank you for tuning in to leaddeveloper.com, where we simplify complex property development feasibilities, investment analysis, and everything real estate. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, our Google Sheets-based feasibility suite streamlines the toughest aspects of real estate. Lead Developer Feasibility Suite is trusted by thousands in over 17 countries. Our tools cover everything from quick assessments to detailed cash flow projections and more. Sign up today at leaddeveloper.com for unlimited free access to our expanding library of real estate tools. No credit card needed. Plus, get full support through Edge with step-by-step guidance, exclusive courses, and resources designed for your success. Turn numbers into narratives that win over investors and lenders. Join Lead Developer now.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the world of land development feasibility.
It's fascinating, really. It's where those big dreams meet the hard numbers.
Right. Got to make sure those dreams are actually, grounded in reality.
Exactly. And that's where the feasibility study comes in. Think of it as a roadmap for success, I guess.
So, you've got this amazing vision for a piece of land, but you need to figure out if it's actually, doable, both practically and financially.
Yeah, that's the heart of it. You need to answer some tough questions, like what are the costs involved? Can I actually make a profit? What are the potential risks?
I've got some great material here from Amber Khanna at Lead Developer. She's got these awesome YouTube videos, a really in-depth article all about this stuff.
She's great. Really knows her stuff.
Okay, so in one of her videos, Land Development Feasibility Study Checklist, she kind of walks us through the land subdivision process. And it's more than just buying a piece of land and boom, you start building.
Oh, yeah. Way more. It's a whole process.
So first things first, you got to find a site that actually has, potential.
Right. And that's not always obvious. You might see a beautiful piece of land, but then zoning restrictions.
Ugh, zoning. Always a headache.
It can be.
Yeah.
But it's important. Zoning dictates what you can build, how high you can go, how many units you can squeeze in.
So you might have this grand vision of building a high-rise condo complex, but zoning says, nope, single-family homes only. Dreams crushed.
It happens, which is why it's so important to research zoning early on. Don't fall in love with a piece of land until you know what you can actually do with it.
Okay, so you found the perfect site, zoning is all good. Then what? You bring in the big guns.
Exactly. It's time to assemble your development dream team. You're going to need a civil engineer to, design all the infrastructure, the roads, utilities, that kind of stuff.
And probably a land surveyor too, right? To map everything out.
Oh, absolutely. And don't forget about geotech experts. They're the soil whisperers.
Soil whisperers. I like that. They're tell me your secret, soil. Are you strong enough to support this building? Are you going to cause a landslide?
Something like that. They analyze the soil to make sure it's, suitable for building.
Okay, so you've got your team assembled. The soil is whispering sweet nothings. Then comes the dreaded P word. Permits.
Oof. Yeah, that's always a fun process. Lots of paperwork, meetings with local officials.
I'm getting stressed just thinking about it.
But it's necessary. It's where you get those all-important approvals to actually start building.
And like you said earlier, zoning plays a big role here, right?
Absolutely. Zoning can make or break your project at this stage.
So you've got to be a zoning ninja.
Pretty much. You need to know the rules inside and out, and sometimes you got to get creative, negotiate a bit with the local council.
Come on, guys, just give me a little variance here. I promise it'll be a beautiful building.
Something like that. It's all part of the process.
Okay, so let's say you've somehow managed to navigate the permitting maze. What's next? Laying the groundwork, literally.
You got it. It's time to connect those essential services to your site. Think gas, water, electricity, sewage. All the stuff that makes a modern community, functional.
Right, all that invisible infrastructure that we kind of take for granted until it's not there.
Exactly. And these costs, these hard costs, as they're called, they can add up quickly.
Especially if you need to extend existing infrastructure, right? Run those pipes and cables a long way to reach your site.
Yeah, that gets expensive fast. And then, of course, you got to obtain individual titles for each subdivided lot, kind of like giving them their own little birth certificates.
Ah, right, so you can actually sell them.
Exactly. It's all about getting those legal ducks in a row.
Khanna actually highlights the importance of deal structure in one of her pieces, specifically the Property Development Feasibility Study Land Subdivision article. There's a case study with two developers who partnered with a landowner.
Oh, yeah, Mr. X and Mr. Y. Interesting case.
They used a property option agreement along with a joint venture. Can you unpack that for us a bit? Why would a developer choose that route?
Well, a property option agreement is kind of like dibs on a property. It gives you the right to buy it at a set price, but you don't have to buy it.
So like a try before you buy for land?
Haha, exactly. Gives you time to do your due diligence, get your ducks in a row, see if the project is actually feasible. And the joint venture, well, that's all about sharing the risk and the reward.
Makes sense. Spread the love and the potential financial pain. Okay, so Kana gives us this great checklist of key areas to cover in a feasibility study. Let's break that down a bit, shall we?
Sounds good to me. Let's start with acquisition costs.
That's more than just the price of the land, right? Like there are hidden costs lurking in the shadows.
Always. You've got your legal fees, due diligence costs, those option agreement fees that we just talked about. It all adds up.
So important to factor all that in from the get-go.
Absolutely. And then you've got your soft costs. Those are all the pre-construction expenses that are easy to overlook but can really sneak up on you.
Okay, give me an example. What kind of things are we talking about?
Think consultant fees, permit reports, soil tests, all that fun paperwork stuff.
Right, it's not all glamorous site visits and hard hats, is it?
Nope. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that goes into making a development happen.
Okay, and speaking of unglamorous but essential, let's talk hard costs.
Ah, yes. The nitty-gritty of actually building the darn thing.
So connecting all those utilities, building roads, putting in landscaping, all that good stuff.
Exactly. That's where those big-ticket items really start to hit your budget.
I can imagine. And what about the cost of, actually getting the money to do all this? The loans, the interest rates.
Finance costs. Those are crucial. You need to consider the cost of holding the land, property taxes, insurance, and then there's the interest on any loans you take out.
Right, those pesky interest rates. And I've heard these terms thrown around. Loan-to-cost ratios, loan-to-value ratios. What are those all about?
Those are how lenders assess risk. They want to see that your project is financially sound and that they have a good chance of, getting their money back.
Makes sense. So they're basically like, show me the money, or at least a solid plan for how you're going to make money.
Pretty much.
No.
And of course, you can't forget about profit margins and investor returns. A feasibility study isn't just about breaking even. It's about making sure you make a healthy profit and keep those investors happy.
Right. Got to keep the money train rolling.
Yeah.
So a feasibility study is about determining if a project is not just possible, but actually profitable.
Exactly. It's about maximizing your return on investment while also, managing those risks.
And speaking of risk, that brings us to sensitivity analysis. Now, that sounds kind of intense.
It can be, but it's also super important. It's basically a way of stress testing your project to see how it holds up under different scenarios.
So, like, what if construction costs go up, or interest rates spike, or, I don't know, a meteor hits your construction site?
Well, hopefully not a meteor. But yeah, those kinds of things. Sensitivity analysis lets you play around with different variables and see how they might impact your bottom line.
So you're basically a fortune teller with a spreadsheet.
Something like that. It's all about being prepared for the unexpected.
Makes sense. Okay, let's bring back our friends, Mr. X and Mr. Y, and their Koala Reserve project. They had some interesting insights about highest and best use, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah.
They initially thought they could squeeze 25 lots onto their site, but zoning restrictions in that Koala Reserve, well, those put a damper on things.
Those darn koalas. Always messing with development plans.
Well, they've got to live somewhere.
Right.
But
yeah,
it's a great example of how highest and best use isn't always what you initially envision.
So you've got to be flexible, adapt to the realities of the site and the regulations.
Exactly. Sometimes you got to scale back those grand visions a bit.
And Mr. X and Mr. Y also really emphasize the importance of having a good team, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They brought in a town planner to deal with that Koala Reserve situation, a land surveyor to map everything out, a civil engineer. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Love it. And their case study also mentioned this smart feasibility calculator they used. What's the deal with these specialized software tools?
They're amazing. They can really take the guesswork out of financial modeling. You can plug in all your project details, run those sensitivity analyses we talked about. It's like having a superpowered spreadsheet.
So basically a must-have for any serious developer.
Pretty much. They can save you a lot of time and headaches and help you make smarter decisions.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to touch on something that Kana emphasizes throughout her work. Research.
Oh, yes. You can never do too much research in land development.
Right. It's not just about the numbers. It's about understanding the context, the market, the risks. everything.
Exactly. Kind of has this great analogy about dating.
Oh, tell me. I love a good analogy.
She says, you wouldn't marry someone without getting to know them first, right?
Okay, that makes sense. So you're saying land development is like a marriage, a long-term commitment full of joys and challenges.
Uh-huh. Something like that. The point is, you need to do your homework before you make a commitment. Get to know the land, the market, the regulations, all of it.
So don't rush into anything. Take your time, do your research, and make sure it's a good fit.
Solid advice. It's like, you wouldn't just jump into a relationship without, like, going on a few dates first.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Speaking of things you got to be careful with, Kana talks about this acronym STCA that pops up a lot in property listings.
Ah, yes, subject to council approval. Sounds promising, right?
Yeah, it's like, hey, this land is a gold mine, just waiting for you to strike it rich.
Well, not so fast. That STCA can be a bit of a red flag, I guess.
Oh, how
Yeah.
so?
It basically means that, the seller is saying, hey, this land could be great for development, but there's no guarantee that the council will actually approve your plans.
So it's like a big maybe.
Yeah, pretty much. And that maybe can turn into a big fat no real quick.
Ouch. So what are some of the pitfalls of getting seduced by that STCA label?
Well, the biggest one is assuming that council approval is like a done deal.
Right, like, oh, it's just a formality, they'll rubber stamp it, no problem.
That's a dangerous assumption. Council approval depends on so many things: zoning, environmental regulations, community feedback. It's a whole process.
So you're saying don't pop the champagne just yet.
Exactly. Do your due diligence, talk to the experts, make sure you've got a solid plan, and then maybe start thinking about celebrating.
Okay, good advice. Now let's talk about, the people involved in all of this. Mr. X and Mr. Y, in their case study, they really highlighted the importance of having a collaborative team of professionals.
Oh, yeah. You can't do this alone. You need a good team, people you could trust, people who know what they're doing.
So, who are the essential players on this development dream team?
Well, we've already talked about some of them.
Hmm?
The town planner, to help you navigate all those zoning and permitting hurdles.
Right, they're like the zoning whisperers.
Uh-huh, exactly. And then you've got your land surveyor to make sure everything is measured and mapped out correctly.
Got to make sure those property lines are straight.
Absolutely. And of course, your civil engineer to design all the infrastructure and make sure it's, up to code and all that.
Right, the people who make sure the water flows where it's supposed to and the lights turn on when you flick the switch. Important stuff.
That's essential. And don't forget about your legal team to help you with all the contracts and agreements.
Ah, right, the fine print people. Always gonna have those. And I guess depending on the project, you might need other specialists too, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Architects, landscape architects, environmental consultants. It all depends on the specifics of the development.
So it's like building your own little army of experts.
Uh-huh, pretty much. You need all the help you can get in this game. And speaking of help, remember that smart feasibility calculator that Mr. X and Mr. Y used?
Yeah, those software tools are pretty amazing, aren't they?
They can be a real game changer. They help you, crunch the numbers, run different scenarios, see how different factors might impact your bottom line.
So you can play what if with your development plan.
Exactly. What if construction costs go up? What if interest rates rise? What if the market takes a dip? These tools help you prepare for all those possibilities.
Okay, so we've got our team assembled, we've got our software humming, now we need the money. How did Mr. X and Mr. Y approach financing their venture?
Well, remember, they had that joint venture with the landowner, so they were able to leverage the land as equity. That really helped them reduce their upfront costs.
Right, that's smart. But what about construction financing? How do developers typically get the money to, actually build the darn thing?
Construction loans. That's usually the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
But getting a construction loan, not always a walk in the park.
Oh, I can imagine. Banks aren't exactly known for, throwing money at risky ventures.
Right. They want to see that you've done your homework, that you've got a solid plan, that your project is, likely to succeed.
So that feasibility study we keep talking about, that's pretty important when it comes to getting financing.
Oh, absolutely. It's like your business plan, your resume, your ticket to the money train.
Gotta impress those loan officers. Okay, so you've got your financing sorted. Now, let's talk about risk. Even the best laid plans can go awry, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. There are risks everywhere in land development. Costs can go up, permits can get delayed, the market can shift.
And don't forget those pesky koalas.
Uh-huh, right. They're always a wild card.
Yeah.
But seriously, risk management is a huge part of this game.
So what are some ways to, mitigate those risks?
Well, first and foremost, due diligence. Do your research, engage the experts, understand the potential challenges, try to minimize those unknown unknowns as much as possible.
Right, knowledge is power, and I guess it's also about having a plan B, or maybe even a plan C.
Exactly. You got to be flexible, adaptable, ready to pivot when things don't go according to plan.
And don't forget about insurance.
Oh, yeah. Insurance is your friend in this business. It can help you, weather those unexpected storms.
Okay, so we've covered risks. Now let's talk about the flip side, opportunity. Specifically, understanding the market.
Market research. That's where the real excitement starts.
Yeah.
It's all about understanding what people want, what they're willing to pay for.
Right, got to make sure there's actually a demand for what you're building.
Exactly. No point building a bunch of luxury condos if nobody can afford them.
Or if everyone is moving out of the city and into, like, tiny houses in the woods, trends change.
They do. That's why market research is so important. It helps you stay ahead of the curve, understand those shifting trends, and make sure your development is, meeting the needs of the market.
So it's not just about building something, it's about building the right something.
Exactly. Build it, and they will come, but only if it's what they actually want.
Okay, now we can't talk about land development without talking about zoning. It's kind of like the rules of the game, right?
It is. It's what dictates how land can be used in a specific area.
So like what you can build, where you can build it, how high you can go, all that jazz.
Exactly. And zoning regulations can be, pretty complex. They vary from one location to another. They can change over time.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah, we've already seen how zoning can throw a wrench into development plans. Remember those poor koalas?
Right. They were victims of zoning. But seriously, it's important to understand zoning from the get-go. It can really make or break your project.
So do your research, talk to the experts, don't assume anything.
Words to live by in land development.
Okay, and let's not forget about infrastructure. It's kind of the backbone of any development, right?
It's think roads, water supply, sewage systems, electricity, telecommunications, all the essential services that make a community, function.
Right. The stuff we often take for granted until it's not there. And connecting all those services to a new development, that can't be cheap.
It's not. It's a major expense, especially if you're developing in a remote area or a place with limited existing infrastructure.
So if you need to run those pipes and cables a long way to reach your site, that adds up quickly.
Oh, yeah. And you also need to consider the capacity of the existing infrastructure. Can the local water supply handle the increased demand from your new development?
Good point. It's about being a good neighbor, right? Making sure your development doesn't overload the existing systems and cause problems for everyone else.
Exactly. It's about integrating seamlessly into the existing community.
Now we need to chat about yield. I imagine it is all about maximizing the development potential of a piece of land.
You're right on the money. It's about squeezing as much value as you can out of that site. In simple terms, it refers to the number of saleable units or lots you can create on that piece of land.
So how many houses or apartments can you realistically fit on that lot while still, creating a desirable living environment?
Exactly. And yield is affected by a bunch of different things. Zoning, of course, plays a big role.
Ugh, zoning again. Always lurking in the shadows.
Right. But there are other factors too. The size and shape of the site, the topography, the target market.
So if you're building luxury homes, you're not going to cram as many houses onto a lot as you would if you were building, say, townhouses or apartments.
Exactly. It's all about finding that sweet spot between maximizing density and creating a desirable community.
Makes sense. Now, speaking of things that can be a bit of a headache, what about the approvals process?
Yes, the dreaded approvals process. It can be a long and winding road, that's for sure.
Tell me about it. I'm getting flashbacks to my last trip to the DMV.
I feel you. But seriously, it's a necessary evil. You've got to get those approvals from all the relevant authorities before you can start building anything.
So we're talking planning approvals, building permits, environmental assessments, all that jazz.
All of that. And it can take time. Months, sometimes even years, depending on the complexity of the project and the efficiency of the local bureaucracy.
Right. Gotta love those government timelines. So patience is a virtue in land development.
Oh, absolutely. You need to be persistent, organized, and maybe have a good lawyer on speed dial.
Good advice. Now let's talk about a concept that sounds a bit scary. Holding costs.
Yeah, yes, those are the silent killers of many a development project.
Silent killers. That sounds ominous. Tell me more.
Holding costs are basically all the expenses you rack up while you're, holding onto a property before it starts generating any income.
So like property taxes, insurance, loan interest, those kinds of things.
Exactly. And those costs can really eat into your profits if you're not careful.
Especially if your project gets delayed, right? Like if you're waiting for permits or, I don't know, a family of koalas to relocate.
Right. Those delays can be costly. That's why it's so important to, factor holding costs into your feasibility study and make sure you've got enough financial wiggle room to cover them.
Okay, so we've got to be mindful of those holding costs. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about community engagement.
Ah, yes, that's a big one. You can't just, barge into a community and start building stuff without considering the people who already live there.
Right, it's about being a good neighbor.
Exactly. Community engagement is all about, building relationships with the locals, addressing their concerns, making sure your development fits into the existing fabric of the community.
So it's not just about ticking boxes and getting approvals. It's about building trust and goodwill.
Exactly. It's about creating a win-win situation for everyone involved.
Now let's talk about exit strategies. It sounds a bit dramatic, like we're planning a bank heist or something.
Not quite. An exit strategy in land development is simply your plan for, how you're going to sell or dispose of the property once it's developed.
Ah, so like how you're going to cash in on your investment.
Exactly. And there are different ways to do that. You could sell the developed lots individually to homeowners or builders, or you could hold on to the property and generate income through rentals.
So like become a landlord.
Exactly. Or you could sell the entire project to a single buyer, like a real estate investment trust or a pension fund. There are lots of options.
So the choice of exit strategy really depends on like your goals and your risk tolerance.
Absolutely. It's a big decision, and it's something you need to think about early on in the process.
Okay, so we've got our exit strategy mapped out. Now let's talk about something a little more fun. Amenities.
Ah, yes, the fun stuff.
Okay.
Amenities are all those extra features that, make a community more desirable.
So like parks and playgrounds, swimming pools, fitness centers, those kinds of things.
Exactly. And they can make a big difference when it comes to attracting buyers and justifying higher prices.
Right. It's not just about the house itself. It's about the lifestyle you're selling.
Exactly. So you want to think about your target market and what kind of amenities would appeal to them. Are you targeting families with young children? And maybe a playground and a park are a good idea.
Or if you're targeting like young professionals, maybe a trendy coffee shop or a co-working space would be a bigger draw.
You got it. It's all about understanding your audience and giving them what they want.
Okay, now let's talk about something that can be a bit controversial. Density. It's all about like how tightly packed those houses or apartments are, right?
Right. And density can be a tricky issue. On the one hand, higher density means more units, which means more potential profit for the developer.
But on the other hand, it can lead to concerns about like overcrowding, traffic congestion, strain on infrastructure.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. You want to maximize density without, creating a concrete jungle.
Right. Got to find that sweet spot where you're creating a vibrant community without like overwhelming the existing infrastructure and making everyone miserable.
Exactly. And of course, zoning plays a big role here too. Some areas might encourage high-density development, while others might prioritize lower density.
So it's all about understanding the local context and working within the existing regulations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about something that can make or break a project. Timing.
Timing is everything, they say. But how does that apply to land development?
Well, it could be the difference between a huge success and a colossal flop. Entering the market at the right time can be like catching a wave.
Ride that wave to profit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you misjudge the timing, well, you might end up wiping out.
Ouch. So what are some things to consider when it comes to timing?
Well, you want to think about the economic cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Is the market hot? Are interest rates low? Those are good times to launch a development.
But if the economy is tanking and people are losing their jobs, maybe not the best time to be building luxury condos.
Probably not. But it's not just about the macroeconomics. You also need to consider local factors. Are there any major infrastructure projects in the works? Any upcoming zoning changes?
Right. Got to be aware of what's happening in the neighborhood. So it's about being strategic, doing your research, and, maybe having a little bit of luck on your side.
Luck never hurts. But yeah, timing is crucial. It can make all the difference.
Okay, let's move on to another important aspect of land development. Environmental considerations.
Ah, yes. We can't forget about Mother Nature.
Right. Got to make sure we're being responsible stewards of the land.
Exactly. Environmental regulations are there for a reason. They're designed to protect our natural resources, preserve biodiversity, make sure we're not messing things up for future generations.
So what kind of things fall under the umbrella of environmental considerations?
Oh, it's a broad category. Protecting endangered species, managing stormwater runoff, preserving trees and vegetation. It all depends on the specific location and the potential environmental impacts of the development.
Right, like if you're building in an area with, say, a sensitive wetland ecosystem, you're going to have to be extra careful.
Exactly. You might need to do environmental impact assessments, get special permits, maybe even adjust your development plans to minimize those impacts.
And remember those koalas we keep talking about? They're a perfect example of how environmental considerations can impact a development.
They are. They're like the poster children for environmental regulations.
Okay, so we've got to be mindful of the environmental impact of our development. What about the people who are actually going to buy or rent those houses or apartments? How do we get them excited about our project?
That's where marketing and sales come in.
Right, got to spread the word.
Exactly. Marketing and land development is all about, showcasing your project's unique selling points, creating a buzz, generating leads.
So like those glossy brochures with the beautiful photos of happy families frolicking in their new homes.
That's part of it.
Right.
But it's more than just pretty pictures. You need a solid marketing strategy that targets your ideal buyer.
So like, are you going for young families, empty nesters, hipsters looking for a walkable urban lifestyle, that kind of thing?
Exactly. You need to know who you're trying to reach and tailor your message accordingly.
Makes sense. And then once you've got those leads, you need a good sales team to, seal the deal.
Absolutely. Sales is all about building relationships, understanding the needs of potential buyers, and, convincing them that your development is the perfect place for them to call home.
Okay, so we've marketed our project, we sold those units. Now it's time to actually build the darn thing. Enter project management.
Yes, the herding cats phase of the development process.
Herding cats, that sounds chaotic.
It can be. Project management is all about, keeping everything on track, managing budgets, coordinating contractors, dealing with unexpected problems.
So you're basically the conductor of the development orchestra, making sure everyone is playing the right tune at the right time.
That's a great analogy. And believe me, it's not always easy to keep everyone in sync. But a good project manager is essential for a successful development.
They're like the glue that holds everything together.
Exactly. They keep the project moving forward, on time, and within budget.
Okay, so project management is all about organization, communication, and, a healthy dose of problem-solving skills.
You got it.
Right.
You need to be adaptable, flexible, able to think on your feet and come up with creative solutions when things inevitably go wrong.
Right, because in land development, there's always something that can go wrong.
Always. But that's part of the challenge and the excitement of this business.
Okay, let's talk about something that's often overlooked but can be really important. Heritage preservation.
Yes, respecting the past.
Right. It's not just about building new stuff. It's about, preserving those buildings and places that have historical or cultural significance.
Exactly. And sometimes that can be a challenge, especially in areas that are undergoing rapid development.
Right. It's like, how do you balance the need for progress with the desire to preserve the past?
It's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. But I think it's important to at least try to find a balance. Maybe you can incorporate some of those historic elements into your new development. Or maybe you can work with preservation groups to, find a way to protect those important sites.
So it's about being creative and finding solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly. And remember, heritage preservation can actually be a selling point for your development.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, people are often drawn to places with, character and history. So if you can incorporate some of those elements into your development, it can make it more appealing to buyers.
So it's not just about preserving the past, it's about creating a more interesting and desirable community.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
Okay, now let's talk about something that's becoming increasingly important in the world of development. Green building practices.
Yes, building for a sustainable future.
Right. It's not just about, making a profit. It's about doing it in a way that's responsible and environmentally friendly.
Exactly. Green building is all about minimizing your environmental impact, reducing energy consumption, using sustainable materials.
So like solar panels, energy-efficient appliances, that kind of thing.
All of that. And it's not just about the building itself. It's about the entire development, thinking about things like, stormwater management, landscaping, transportation.
Right, creating a community that's like in harmony with nature.
Exactly. And the great thing about green building is that it's not just good for the planet. It's also good for your bottom line.
Oh, how so?
Well, green buildings tend to be more energy efficient, which means lower operating costs for the residents. And they're often more desirable to buyers, so you can command higher prices.
So it's a win-win for everyone.
Exactly. It's about doing well by doing good.
Love it. Okay, and I think this is a good place to wrap up this part of our deep dive into land development feasibility. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore.
And in some cities, those green building standards are like mandatory for new developments.
So it's not just a trend, it's like the new normal in responsible development.
Exactly. It's becoming the expectation. And, green building doesn't have to be this like super expensive thing.
Oh, good, because budgets are always a concern, right?
Right. But sometimes it's the simple changes that make a big difference, like using energy efficient lighting or, installing low flow faucets.
Okay, that makes sense. Small changes can add up. Well, we've covered a ton of information in this deep dive. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners who are, like, ready to jump into the world of land development?
Let's see. I guess the biggest takeaway is that feasibility is about so much more than just like crunching numbers.
Right, it's not just about the bottom line.
Exactly. It's about looking at a project from all angles. You got the financial side, of course, but then you've got the regulatory hurdles, the environmental considerations, the community impact.
That's a lot to juggle.
It is, but that's what makes it so interesting and so challenging.
So what's the secret to success in this field?
Well, I don't think there's any one secret.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick a few things, I'd say first and foremost, do your research.
Knowledge is power.
It is. And then build a strong team. Surround yourself with experts who can guide you.
Right, because you can't do it all alone.
Exactly. And finally, be patient. Land development is a long game.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. There will be setbacks, there will be delays, there will be moments where you want to pull your hair out.
Oh, I can imagine.
But if you're persistent, if you're passionate about what you're doing, if you're willing to, put in the time and the effort,
You can make it happen.
you can. And it's so rewarding when you do.
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on.
It is. It's been fun chatting about all this stuff.
Me too. I've learned a lot. And I hope our listeners have too.
Me too.
Okay, so that wraps up our deep dive into the world of land development feasibility. Huge thanks to Amber Khanna for all her amazing insights. Be sure to check out her work at Lead Developer.
Yeah, she's great.
And thanks to all of you for listening. Until next time, keep dreaming big and keep those feasibility studies coming.